Well, hello, folks. Welcome to this brief episode of Folks Unfettered. I am your host, Gene Folks. Wanted to come to you live just for a minute to let you know that episode 2 of our Faith series is streaming now on your favorite streaming platform. And I also wanted to share, in light of recent media events, something that I had taken away from part 2 of our episode series on faith with our guest host, Rod Myers, out of Sarasota, Florida. One of the things that struck me as I was listening to the episode was this idea that he had mentioned about having the courage to change. And that was one of the key takeaways for me is whether or not we have the courage to change. And although he talks about it in respect to faith, I also wanted to bring it to bear as it relates to every other part of our lives. When we are talking about the recent events, as far as some of the social injustices that are happening to people who happen to look like me, is whether or not we as a nation have the courage to change, whether or not we have the courage to change those institutional and systemic um, processes and long held beliefs that have really minimized and marginalized the lives of people of color specifically. Also, whether or not we have the courage to change um, as far as it is relating to our lives in how we were raised. A lot of times the people that are most or should be most impactful in our lives are mothers and fathers and grandparents. um, we tend to not question what they teach us. And so we will forgive a multitude of transgressions because that sort of pain feels warm and fuzzy. You'll find that a lot in divorce cases where the person who is the primary caregiver will make their children a part of their divorce process. And a family member once said to me that uh, children are a byproduct of the relationship and should not be subjected to that person's emotional feelings towards whether it's the husband against the mother or the mother against the husband. And so a lot of times we find instances of long held emotional abuse by the custodial parent that has their children feeling some way about their parent, and you, the non-custodial parent, and you will begin to set up this fabricated life where the children are then indoctrinated into that and will publicly and privately sort of try to continue on that message. There are several studies that have been shown on that. Now the courts are actually starting to engage in that, and that's called parental alienation syndrome. The issue is whether or not those children that have been put in that abusive situation have the courage to change, because oftentimes that you have to challenge what you were told and taught to believe. Also within our the way that we do business, whether or not we have the courage to change. This is very vitally important as it relates to our ability to identify, to recognize, to promote, and to retain leaders of color. That if the majority of people that are running organizations are not familiar with the gifts and talents of individuals of color, then we are losing mass amount of potential human capital that has the ability to solve some of your organization's most pressing needs. And whether we are talking about faith, whether we are talking about family, whether we are talking about vocation, whether we are talking about national pride, There has to be a tipping point to where we have to have the courage to not only challenge those beliefs when we find them to be unsustainable, but we also have the courage to change once it's put in front of our face. We sort of hit that fork in the road that says, "No, I'm going to continue what believing what I believe," which is okay. Basically, kind of saying I'm preferring to stay ignorant, or I am going to travel down this road regardless of how uncomfortable this will be for me. I know that in my own personal life that I have met those forks in the roads to where I have either had to evolve my ability to change, or whether or not I stay stuck where I was. And I am just very grateful that I am a person who constantly challenges themselves and tries to embrace the truth in all things. I don't do it perfectly. I would tell you that I am a continual work in progress, and I believe that if we all are works in progress, then we're able to listen more actively than reactively, right? I think that becomes one of the challenges that we have. And I'll tell you what the impetus of this, not just Brother Myers's message on faith, but I had popped up in my feed about something that I thought I knew about, but I didn't. And it's about this attorney Stevenson who took on a case um, that involved a gentleman whom had been incarcerated for 30 years for a crime he didn't commit, that was committed in a city that he had never visited. And it was a murder of two people that he had never known. And when this gentleman was picked up, um, he was actually told by the detectives that you have several things going against you. One is that you're black. Two is that I'm white. The prosecutor's white. The judge is white. And so you don't stand a chance. And more than likely, the jury's going to be white. Now, people have asked me, well, what part of the country did that come from? Because they usually will lead that to being in the South. I will tell you that that is throughout the United States of America. That is not just the South. The North may be a little bit more subtle with it, but it is still existent in this area. And so one of the things that I had posted was this idea of what Attorney Stevenson had said, and I wanted to share that with you in best way that I can. So I'm going to paraphrase him in this because it should be alarming. It was alarming to me, and it explains a lot. Um, he said that um, uh, mass incarceration is the evolution of slavery. I want to let that sink in. Mass incarceration is the evolution of slavery. If you look at the Constitution of the United States, the only way that you can enslave people is if they have committed a crime and then they get labeled with the of being a felon. And if you're labeled with being a felon, you are labeled a felon for the rest of your life. So this misconception we have that you have paid your debt to society is a lie. I want that to sink in because felons cannot rent apartments. Felons cannot get education, a Pell Grant, or a loan. There are a lot of things that felons cannot do. That's a I don't know if that makes you nervous, but it makes me nervous, right? And so he said that mass incarceration, which is affecting the African American community, uh, at an alarmingly high percentage than other races, um, is at the evolution of slavery. So he said that slavery was evolved into lynching. Lynching evolved into codified segregation. And the era that we're living in right now is that codified segregation evolved into mass incarceration. And the problem is that his defendants are people that look like me, who have either received harsher sentences than they should have received, and in most cases are sitting on death row for crimes that they did not commit, because at the root of our criminal justice system, it is toxic and violent, and not enough people are speaking up. We we can only keep talking about this for so long. The question becomes whether or not we as a nation have the courage to change so that it is more equitable for all of her citizens. And I wonder whether or not we really have the courage to change, especially as a nation that claims to have the favor of God. I don't think we're looking at this um, with clear vision. And so that really struck me today, and how it affects our mental and emotional well-being as a nation. How we have to ask ourselves the question whether or not we have the courage to change or not. But let's be honest about it. Let's not pussyfoot around with it. Change is always difficult, but especially when you're trying to get better. If you weigh 500 pounds and you go to the gym, you're going to feel some pain as you're starting to lose weight, and as you're starting to get more fit, and as you're starting to, your heart's starting to pump better. You'll go through a period of time um, in that transition period where you will be tired and you'll be exhausted. But you either do one of two things: you either quit and decide that this is who I am, and that's okay, or you say, you know what, um, I want to change for the better because this needs to be changed. And so we are going to continue to work out. I just wanted to come on briefly and say that on the Folks Unfettered show, we will continue to be advocates for change. That as the show continues to grow and evolve and relate to more people, and as our audience broadens, one of the tenets of this program is that we will not shrink away from being very vocal on our podcast channel, on our YouTube channel, and in any interviews that I conduct, that we will constantly have as our foundation the courage to change. And I encourage you, the viewer and the listener, to embark with us on this journey, to walk alongside us on this journey, even if we don't agree. Let's talk about it. Let's put it out there. Let's work it out. It is my personal belief that we want to have this discussion, that we want to be able to do better and understand. Because right now, it's as if we all have our heads under the covers and we're yelling from the left and we're yelling from the right. That ability to sort of look at these sort of disparities in how we view ourselves, our nation, and our place in the world is what gave birth to the Folks Unfettered show. Because as I started having conversation with my conservative friends, and I would have conversations with my liberal friends, I found that we were able to have compassion, empathy, as we were seeking to understand. They taught me some things. I learned from them, they learned from me, and we remain friends to this day. We're all in the same boat. The question is whether or not we have the courage to change. I don't care what your mother taught you. I don't care what your granddaddy taught you. I don't care, what we used to be as a nation. Everyone says they want to make America great again, um, y- which assumes we weren't great in the first place. We have the ability to evolve. Let's just evolve in the right direction. We have this national dilemma, and that dilemma is whether or not we have the courage to look at our past for what it was, to embrace it for what it was and what it is and what it continues to be, and then we put the work in to make our nation stronger, better, and a light on the hill. Folks, we're not there yet, and we won't be there if we keep sweeping this thing under the rug. We won't do it. We we just won't be the nation. We just won't be the nation that I believe we all want to be. And um, that's going to take all of us recognizing that we must have the courage to change. Folks, that's all I have for you this on this Wisdom Wednesday. We hope that you'll stick with us as we um, are releasing our final episode entitled "Are the Foundations of Your Faith Faithful?" Which releases April 12th. And I will hop back on and have a conversation with those of you that have taken the question that we've asked you. We would like to hear from you, our audience. We would like for you to participate in this journey along with us. Send us a email, send us a message on our Spotify channel, on our Amazon channel, and on our YouTube channel. Comments are welcome as always. We encourage all comments from everyone, from all walks of life. We want to hear from you, and we want this to be a safe platform for us to respectfully disagree. We just ask everyone to be respectful in how we disagree. So, but let's have those conversations because it really is going to be up to us, we the people of the United States. It's going to be up to us to um, take ownership of our participation in what policies and procedures our elected officials are making, as they say, quote unquote, on our behalf. And what I'm learning is, folks, is that Washington's is not often aligned with what we, the people, actually believe. All the people. American doesn't work very well unless it works for the weakest among us. Do you have the courage to change? I hope you do. Because if you have the courage to change, I promise you this, I want to walk arm in arm alongside with you and do the change as well. I know there's areas that I need to change. Surely, as you look in the mirror, you know there's areas that perhaps you need to change too. Let's change together. Thank you, folks, for listening to us here on the Folks Unfettered Show. We hope you'll catch us a current episode of Are the Foundations of Your Faith Faithful, streaming now on all your favorite platforms. And that you'll catch us next week as our guest host, Rod Myers, sums up this series. For those of you that missed it this time, I'm going to play this. I'm going to play this series a couple more times because I believe that it is just that important for us to consider that question. Thank you. And as always, I remain that brother of light, dropping wisdom in your left ear and knowledge in your right.